Wasabi guys, welcome back to another video. We're going to be talking about Double Masters 2022, giving you a review of what I believe to be the best cards in the set. That's the whole purpose behind a Masters product, is that you're getting incredibly sought after cards in one package, in one product. I've given my opinion about this set already. It did feel like bulk, but I think I was mostly distracted by the legendary creature options that are quite abundant in this set. So much to the point that you could confuse this for a Commander Legends set. They might as well have just called it Commander Masters, because you get a lot of Commander product commanders. I don't hate it. To me though, it just felt like they needed to go with a theme, desperately trying to avoid the redundant feeling of Master sets anyway. So let's start it off here with the big three that are getting a reprint in yet another Master set. This has to be like the 4th or 5th time this has happened. Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, Kozilek Butcher of Truth, Ulamog the Infinite Gyre are all getting a reprint, and while they're great cards, you're not going to hate pulling these, ever. It's just weird that enough time has passed for Wizards to include the newer updated Eldrazi into one of these Master sets. Emrakul the Promised End and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger especially are both pretty expensive, and people want them. They're looking for them. I know Kozilek the Great Distortion ended up getting the Secret Lair treatment, but still, I'm tired of seeing the 4th or 5th reprint for Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. I know it has its usefulness outside of Commander. I know some people still play that, but choosing these three over those three would have been really simple to do, and it would have helped give this set more of its own identity. More unique reprints are always going to help a Master set stand out. But moving on to white, it seems like out of the 5 colors, we had 3 that did really well, and then 2 that got mostly bulk. Now the 3 you're seeing here are okay reprints, meaning that I don't think people were desperately looking for them. No one was saying, God, I gotta play with Emil, but only if it gets a reprint. Weathered Wayfarer was a great card in white. I think a bit underplayed, but now that it's got a reprint, people have fewer excuses not to play it in their white decks. Divine Visitation was great for token decks, but not essential. It's a cool little token trick if you wanted to just take advantage of making normally 1/1 white weenie creatures suddenly getting 4/4 flyers. That's insane. But then we got the better 3 reprints, I think, for white in Monastery Mentor, Teferi's Protection, and Smothering Tithe. The last 2 especially being really requested reprints. They see a high percentage of play compared to a lot of other cards in the set, and they're 2 incredibly unique cards, especially Teferi's Protection. If you think you're about to lose, you can just stall. Monastery Mentor, I think, has its usefulness outside of Commander, which is a big reason why I think people want it. You have Pioneer, and Smothering Tithe has, in a way, become white's Rhystic Study. You don't even need to synergize with it, and it's good in your deck. And then we move on to blue. Blue didn't really get a ton, if you're just counting mono blue cards. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I remember when Mana Drain was the chase card for Iconic Masters. That was a pretty big deal back then. It was also a big deal when Consecrated Sphinx got its first reprint. It didn't tank the value of the card long term, and I don't think this reprint is going to tank its value either. The most significant reprint, however, is actually Force of Negation. Just like with Mana Drain, it's highly sought after if you're looking to play more of a control deck in blue, more competitive decks. If you don't have to spend mana necessarily to do something, it makes it a bit more competitive. But then we have black, and I think black got maybe the biggest reprint if we're just talking about price. But before we get to that, we have, of course, some middle-of-the-road reprints that I think are good, necessary. Cards that, if on average you were to pull something like these, you wouldn't complain. Surgical Extraction, of course, for non-commander decks. Any kind of deck where you can play multiples of one thing. Surgical Extraction's a great sideboard card. Gravecrawler for zombie decks and combo decks. One of the best zombies ever made. Liliana the Last Hope, not really relevant for Commander, but again, this isn't all for Commander. From what I remember, she was a lot more powerful back in Standard, might be in Modern as well. But of course, the big reprints for black, we have Imperial Seal, Bitter Blossom, and Damnation. I do like Imperial Seal getting a reprint in this set, however, I warned people during last week's Market Watch, I don't anticipate it holding 350. At least not for long. There's going to be a honeymoon phase here, and the more people play with it, because it's been very difficult to find for years, the more they're going to realize it's not a mana crypt, it's not a mana drain, it doesn't doesn't really have any significant advantage over cards that are already played, like Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, in a high percentage of decks. So for that, I think it's going to settle somewhere in the 200, maybe even lower range. This is the kind of card that if they do master sets again, it's going to get a reprint, and the value of the reprints are going to be lower. The Judge promo might be fine, and you know the Portal 3 Kingdoms original version is going to do pretty well, but this is the big chase card of the set, so you want to have some long-term value out of it. Bitter Blossom and Damnation were safe reprints. They've already reprinted these a dozen times. They hold their value well. They're going to hold their value well after this set. It's just they're nowhere near the kind of chase cards that they used to be. Red is kind of similar to blue. Got a lot of bulk in the rare department. However, the big one here is of course Dockside Extortionist. Percentage-wise, it sees a ton of play in Commander compared to a lot of other red cards in the set, sees competitive EDH play, and with the popularity of treasure token strategies, this was a no-brainer to see a reprint sometime soon, especially because it was only printed originally in one pre-con deck in 2019. Warrior's Oath is another Portal 3 Kingdoms card that I think people might be distracted by the value of the original. The card itself here is nothing special. We have a bunch of other red cards that do exactly the same thing, that are pennies because it's just not something that you play with on a regular basis. There are ways of taking advantage of this, giving control of it to your opponent so they would lose the game, but I know people are going to see, oh, it was a $300 card or however expensive it was before. Yeah, that's the original version from Portal 3 Kingdoms, which a lot of cards in that set have a massive premium. Seasoned Pyromancer is a safe reprint. I think Modern or Legacy took advantage of it, and it got pretty pricey. Green got a bit of support, although I would say you don't have your Imperial Seal. You do get some quality rares. You get quality rares like Hardened Scales, Green Sun Zenith, Oracle of Moldiah. I remember back in 2017, 2018, right around when I started this channel, I was one of those people who were saying Oracle needed to get a reprint badly because it was like $40 or $50, and it just made every deck you threw it into significantly better. You got an additional land drop. I mean, that was just crazy. But these are your middle-of-the-road green rares, which isn't too bad, but then you look at the mythics and holy cow, it's just stacked. You have Allosaurus Shepherd, Concordant Crossroads, Food Chain. Those last two are pretty big reprints, and Allosaurus Shepherd has been one of the more sought-after cards over the past couple of years. Concordant Crossroads, originally from Legends, I believe, I thought that had to be on the reserve list, but apparently not. And they even brought back the World Enchantment type, so that's pretty crazy seeing that in 2022. Food Chain, of course, has been part of a lot of combos. I'm not ashamed to say that I've used it a bunch in competitive decks. I've used it a bunch in casual decks. It's very difficult to not combo with the card, let's just say that. And then we move on to our multicolored section of the video. And I have to say, this is probably where Double Masters 2022 is at its weakest, while also giving it its own identity. Because you're going to remember this set for all of the legendary creature options that you see reprints from, going all the way back to their original Commander products. The problem with that is that a lot of them just aren't that expensive. So first here we're going to talk about some quality ones that you're definitely not going to be upset. Assassin's Trophy, Anguished Unmaking, great removal in whatever format. Anguished Unmaking has been a Commander staple ever since it came out, and this is one of the first times it's getting a reprint, which is pretty crazy. We do have the Secret Lair, but I don't really count that because normal people don't buy Secret Lair stuff. I know I'm going to get someone in the comments mad about that statement, but we have Wrenn and 6, which was a pretty big reprint. Maybe the most expensive multicolored card. It's been quite pricey since the first Modern Horizons released. It does see some Commander play, although it's not nearly as powerful as it is in Modern. You get some other reprints. I think Hydroid Crassus being lowered to rare rarity and not mythic rarity is kind of a concern. And you'll notice this with some cards that have been downgraded because some other cards remained mythics. Hydroid Crassus was a great card in Standard, and I think it's a great card in Commander. I just don't think it's nearly as good as it was originally in the 60-card format. I like it. It's a mana sink for those decks. Supreme Verdict has always been a great board wipe. Can't counter it. Aurelia the War Leader. This got a reprint in a dual deck, like going back to Guilds of Ravnica. I believe the product was originally geared for casual, but it gave you an Aurelia the War Leader, which is an insane Boros-colored creature in Commander. You get an additional combat step, and she's held her value pretty well. You have Elenda the Dusk Rose and Dragonlord Dramoka. Not super strong Commander options on their own, but these do see some play as one of the 99. They're a bit pricey. Both have been above $20 for a while. Thousand Year Storm is another card that got shifted down to rare rarity. It's one of the most insane Izzet cards cards ever made. It's very easy to go off in a single turn and win with it, so I would like to know their reasoning for doing that. And then we have the Commander reprints, and of course, this goes all the way back to 2011 and the original Commander options from those pre-con decks. Animar, by the way, getting a pretty ugly reprint. It's nothing personal to the artist, it's just the original Animar artwork kicked ass, and this one just doesn't really do the same. I don't know, we always have this image of what these characters are in our mind, but then you see them from a different perspective, and then it just changes how you see the entire creature. Not a big fan of that reprinted artwork. Kali of the Vast is maybe the priciest of any of those. She's another one for whatever reason, I don't know why. Kalia has held her value better than pretty much any other commander option. Okay, she gets her 1 millionth reprint, she's still like a $20 card, I don't get it. Mimeoplasm, another example of a card that's getting shifted down in rarity. I believe this was originally a mythic. It's like they arbitrarily decided that some of these were good enough to be mythics, some of them were not. And it's not just limited to 2011, you do get some reprints here. Obviously, you have a Minato, Azuri Claw of Progress. It seems to be, though, that we are primarily focusing on the 2011 Commander cards. You have things like Skullbriar, you have plenty of the other secondary commanders from those products. But it's clear, after looking at a lot of these, that the focus of the set was on Commander Precon cards. And then we have some commanders that, while they weren't in the precons, these are just old school commander options. You have Doran the Siege Tower, Rafika the Many, Ural the Miststalker. They don't see nearly as much play in Commander as they used to, but right around 2011, 2012, when people were playing with Animar and Kalia, you had Rafika of the Many, you had Ural the Miststalker. People were looking at all the sets up to that point to build commander decks, and this is what you came up with. But then we look at our artifacts, and I think you'll agree with me when I say that artifacts got probably the best reprints, as they tend to do in a lot of these sets. The most expensive cards in the game are artifacts. Aether Vial, Mana Vault, Sensei's Divining Top, holding it down for the 1 mana artifact crew. They've all been reprinted before in Masters sets, so it was a no-brainer here. You just want to add more value to the set, make it worthwhile for the consumer. I will say this because I did rag on the Animar artwork. The Mana Vault reprint artwork is fantastic. It's one of the best ones ever. You may feel nostalgic about the original Mana Vault artwork, but I just think this is a better looking card to throw in my deck personally. We get some first time reprinters, I think with the exception of Thrumming Stone on the list. None of these have been reprinted in an actual set, which is cool because Conqueror's Flail is something that I think because it's expensive and it was originally from a Commander Precon, it was harder to find. People weren't as willing to justify throwing it into one of their decks as they are right now because of the reprint likely lowering its price. Nim Deathmantle is a great combo piece. It's getting a reprint, believe it or not, for the first time ever. So this was a well-needed one, great value. Thrumming Stone, it's an explosive card. If you are playing Relentless Rats and you have this out there, you can very easily win the game. Just more quality artifacts. I don't think there was really anything in here that was just screaming chase, chase, chase. You get returning reprints like Darksteel Plate, Phyrexian Altar, Crucible of Worlds to give you more value for your money. Now we move on to lands, and there's really nothing to write home about. Again, all of these have been reprinted before. Forbidden Orchard, City of Brass, right around that $10 range. Cavern of Souls. You're not going to be super thrilled if you pull a City of Brass, but at the same time, you're not going to be stepping off the ledge. One thing I will complain about, I think this is maybe my second greatest complaint for the set, right behind not giving us the newer Eldrazi reprints. We are getting the bounce lands as the uncommons for like the 1 millionth time. I don't hate the bounce lands, in fact, I think they're very underrated. They can save you land drops for your future turns, they're easy to manipulate for more mana, but this is what we have, again, in another Masters set. I have way too many copies of the bounce lands as it is. They're in just about every precon product, and they're just easy little throw-in cards for these sets. It's a Masters set, you're spending a lot of money on it as it is. I would rather have any other uncommon than seeing the bounce lands for the 1 millionth time. But other than that, I think this is an okay Masters set. Feels a little bit redundant when it comes to the rares and the mythics. A lot of these were chase cards in previous Masters sets. You of course run the risk of accumulating a lot of bulk, because a lot of the rares in this set are just legendary creatures from precon products. As for who the set was intended for, because Commander has become even more popular than it's ever been, and we do have the rise of Pioneer, I think this was intended for modern Pioneer and Commander players. And I think why they transitioned before to Modern Horizons, Commander Legends, making products for specific formats, was that those sets became easier to sell. The problem that you may run into with this if you're Wizards of the Coast is that a set that tries to appeal to too many different people maybe won't appeal to anyone at all. I know people have been wanting Imperial Seal, and that's going to be a big selling point for the set, but if the value of that reprint plummets like I think it will, this may just be a very redundant master set. Again, you reprinted the same Eldrazi, you reprinted the same chase cards like Mana Drain, Phyrexian Altar. What's to keep someone from going to those master sets, holding on to those for their value? So it is appropriately named Double Masters because they already did this before. I don't think it's going to be a very memorable one, but if we were to assess the value, I think it is there. Just too many question marks, I think, about the longevity, the long-term value, the long-term impact of making these cards more accessible. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel. I enjoy having you here. We are well past 37,000. Commander Void here. I will see you all next time.